Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Efrem Graham. Ahead today, the blame game in Washington over gas prices, Democrats attacking oil companies while Republicans point the finger at the president's policies on fossil fuels. A possible political crisis in Israel as a member of the fragile ruling coalition resigns, and that could mean another round of elections coming up. Plus,
they came into our house with their machine guns and they didn't even bother to take their shoes off.
See how Orphans Promise is able to help her and others in Ukraine to find shelter as Russia continues invading their area.
We are truly thankful for them hosting us. It's very comfortable. It's a very warm atmosphere.
Then later, investor Elon Musk takes a big stake in Twitter. We'll discuss what it could mean for the social media company.
He wants to see Twitter adhere to more free speech principles.
All these stories and more are coming up next from the CBN Newsroom.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
We begin in our nation's capital with inflation still the top issue for most American. Democrats attacked major oil and gas companies Wednesday, claiming they're guilty of ripping off the public. Others point to the president's policies for the sky-high prices as the blame game plays out. CBN's Brody Carter shows us how both sides are proposing ways to ease the pain at the gas pump.
This tells me that even though it may not feel like it, we're entering our third week of declining gas prices. The current national average is about $4.16 per gallon. That's down about 19 cents from recent highs.
The day Joe Biden took the oath of office, the average retail price of gasoline was $2.38 a gallon. Today, it's $4.16 a gallon. In some parts of the country, it has gone as high as $6.90 a gallon.
Lawmakers are butting heads, pointing fingers at who's to blame for gas prices and the nation's 40-year high inflation rate, which sits at almost 7.9%.
This is not a result of Putin's war. This is a result of Biden policies.
Wednesday, Republicans laid the blame at the president's feet.
The president has a lot of people he wants to blame. He has a whole long list. We can go through all of them. He wants to blame COVID, supply chain, energy executives, Putin, all of them. The American people see through it. They're not buying it.
Democrats are going after big oil, investigating the largest producers for price gouging.
The cost for a barrel of oil was $102, and the price that Americans were paying at the pump was $3.70 a gallon. But today, the price of oil is again back to $102. But for some reason, Americans are now paying $4.20 for a gallon of gas.
Others see rising energy costs as a complex and multifaceted issue.
I have the full expectation that gas prices will continue to slowly drop as stations pass along those decreases. There's just a lot of nuances to how gas prices work that politicians don't seem to understand.
Patrick DeHaan with GasBuddy.com emphasizes that gas companies don't set prices because they fluctuate by the second due to supply and demand in the market.
The person principally responsible for the price at the pump is Joe Biden. Here's what Joe Biden promised in the campaign for president. He said, quote, no more drilling on federal lands, no more drilling, including offshore, no ability for the oil industry to continue to drill, period, ends. He told you what he was going to do, and he did it.
Some lawmakers say today's investigation on big oil, led by Democrats, is just a show, that the hearing will do nothing at all to improve the financial burden that many Americans are facing. That's still to be seen. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott is upset with the Biden administration's policies on the border and says he intends to send illegal immigrants who will be crossing the border to Washington, D.C., including Capitol Hill.
To help local officials whose communities are being overwhelmed by hordes of illegal immigrants who are being dropped off by the Biden administration, Texas is providing charter buses to send these illegal immigrants who have been dropped off by the Biden administration to Washington, D.C. We are sending them to the United States Capitol, where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across our border.
The Texas Tribune reports the governor's office later explained the program is completely voluntary for migrants and will only happen after they have been processed and released by the Department of Homeland Security. The Senate is expected to confirm Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson, securing her place as the first black woman on the high court. 3 Republican senators have said they will support Jackson, who is set to replace Justice Stephen Breyer when he retires this summer. Once she is sworn in, the 51-year-old federal appeals court judge would be the second youngest member of the high court after Amy Coney Barrett, who is 50. She is only the 3rd black justice and the first black woman. And for the first time, 4 of the 9 high court justices will be women. I want to turn now to the war in Ukraine. International pressure on Russia is growing. The United Nations is voting to remove Russia from its Human Rights Council. And the House of Representatives has passed a bill calling for a report on Russian war crimes in Ukraine. The world is beginning to literally see the devastation left by Russia's invasion into Ukraine. The port city of Mariupol is in ruins, with Russian shelling destroying 90% of its infrastructure and leaving 5,000 people dead. Now about 160,000 are trapped with no electricity, communications, heat, or water. The mayor says Russian forces have turned the city into a death camp. Some brutal photos released by the governor of Donetsk region, who says this is an attack on a humanitarian aid center. And the town of Bucha, outside of Kyiv, British authorities say Russian troops left civilian bodies on the ground for at least 10 days before they left the city.
We have seen the dead bodies of civilians, some with bound hands, scattered in the streets.
The U.S. is also announcing it preempted possible Russian cyber attacks on American infrastructure by removing malware from computer networks. I want to remind you, you can help Operation Blessings disaster relief efforts. You can simply call 1-800-700-7000. Let us know that you want to give to Operation Blessings Disaster Relief Fund. You can also write us, CBN Center, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23463. Simply note in the memo line of your check, Disaster Relief Fund. And if you care to, you can text as well. Text OB Crisis to 71777. Or simply visit our website, cbn.com or ob.org. Anything you're able to do is greatly needed and appreciated. Prayer is still needed in Ukraine, and you can be part of that effort as well. Go to cbn.com/prayforukraine to register for an exclusive live prayer event. It's happening Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Taking part will be Christian World News anchor Wendy Griffith, who will bring you the latest on how CBN's team is helping victims of the war in Ukraine, then lead us in prayer. Worship leader Hold the Line, the founder of Hold the Line, Sean Foyt, and other conservative Christians are rallying outside the California headquarters of Disney Wednesday. They did that over what many call the corporation's woke policies. The protesters included some former and even current Disney employees, with many protesters calling for a boycott of the entertainment giant.
Boycott Disney! Boycott Disney! Boycott Disney! Boycott Disney! Boycott Disney!
The protest comes after Disney CEO came out against Florida's parental rights education law, which critics called Don't Say Gay, although the word gay isn't in the measure. The law forbids teachers from talking to children in pre-kindergarten through 3rd grade. And Disney has also angered many conservatives and Christians over other pro-gay policies. You can read more about this story in depth, including Sean Foyt's comments on the protest, at faithwire.com. A member of Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's coalition quit Wednesday over what she calls the government causing Israel to lose its Jewish identity. As Chris Mitchell now reports from Jerusalem, the resignation presents a potential crisis that could lead to another round of elections.
Edith Silman's issue is over the health minister's ruling allowing leavened bread into hospitals during Passover. Opposition leader and former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu applauded the move.
Edith, you proved that what guides you is the concern for the Jewish identity of the State of Israel, the concern for the land of Israel. And I welcome you back home to the nationalist camp.
Silman's departure raises the possibility of new elections less than a year after the government took office. While Bennett still remains in power, the loss means he now oversees a Knesset that stands at 60-60. That makes for a dysfunctional government and once again puts Israel's political future in doubt.
There's definitely numerous scenarios that can take place. It doesn't necessarily mean that Netanyahu can race back into power and form a government. Netanyahu does not have 61 members supporting him.
Still, as Trayman points out, it could create an opportunity.
This might be the first crack in what could be several others that could lead either to a right-wing government being formed without elections or a new election. And polls do show that Netanyahu would soar in a new election and would win more than double the number of votes than any other party, and that more Israelis want him to be the prime minister than any other candidate.
The next few days may determine if the Bennett coalition stays together or Israel may once again face new elections. Gary Lane, CBN News.
That was our Gary Lane reporting. Coming up, see how Orphans Promise is able to help this woman and others find shelter during the horrible war in Ukraine. Stay with us. A 17-year-old Ukrainian girl you see there is one of the millions who are displaced by Vladimir Putin's war. She and others are finding shelter and comfort at a temporary haven staffed by Orphans Promise. Our George Thomas has the story.
Vitalina Zinotka says she'll never forget the day Russian soldiers first appeared on her street.
We saw them approaching from our basement through a crack in the window.
Zinotka, her husband, 2 sons and mother are from Ukraine's southern city of Kherson. On March 11th, 9 days after seizing control of Kherson, Russian troops started fanning out to outlying villages like Zinotka's.
They came into our house with their machine guns and they didn't even bother to take their shoes off.
Zinotka told CBN News that the men were drunk and started intimidating her husband and 18-year-old son.
I felt like my heart was being squeezed. It felt like my soul was being squeezed. And it was even very hard to breathe because I was so fearful.
She slipped into an adjacent room where her mother and 13-year-old son were and whispered to them to pray.
I told my mom to pray that God would rescue us.
The Russians demanded to see their passports.
They were looking at our documents and trying to make sense of them, but they couldn't because they were drunk.
Zinotka says their desperate prayers were suddenly answered.
They were still walking around the house, pointing their guns at us, and praise God, they just left.
Zinotka and her husband escaped this past Saturday under heavy fire as Ukrainian forces attempted to retake Kherson. They headed west from Kherson to Ternopil, where CBN's Orphans Promise runs this training center for children, now converted to house fleeing refugees.
We are truly thankful for them hosting us. It's very comfortable. It's a very warm atmosphere. We were fed well. It's an amazing work that they are doing.
The staff at Ternopil Training Center began gathering supplies within hours of war erupting.
It started with us bringing our own mattresses from home. We had 6 to start with, and were ready to host 10 people. The next day, we received more mattresses, and we were ready to host another 35 refugees.
Orphans Promise bought this 2-story building in 2014 with the goal of reaching children and their families with the gospel. They would hold English classes Monday through Thursday and teach Bible lessons using CBN Superbook on Friday. Some 230 children and young adults showed up every week.
We would teach them about God's law and the meaning of Christ's coming and resurrection.
War has the students now taking classes online. Staff members also hold regular online prayer meetings and counseling sessions when needed.
The fact that we can continue these lessons online brings peace to both us and them.
As refugees poured in, neighbors who lived around the Orphans Promise Center started pitching in. Some cooked, others brought supplies. Parents with children at the center also got involved.
We united in the cause of helping people, serving people, because they have needs.
The city of Ternopil here in the western part of Ukraine has been sort of a rest stop for those who are making their way out of the country. And according to the latest statistics from the center, they say that close to about 600 people have passed through their doors since the start of the war. The majority of those, like 17-year-old Anastasia, staying at the Orphans Promise Center for a night or two. She fled from Sumy, northeast of Kyiv, where Ukrainian forces are launching fierce counterattacks against Russian forces.
I hope I will wake up from this nightmare soon and it will be all over.
Zenotka's family heads further west in the morning to stay with friends.
Staying here is an example of how Ukraine has become one family.
Yet there's no place she'd rather be than home.
I really want to go back, but I'm afraid. It would be very painful because everything is destroyed and I don't know if I can handle that right now.
George Thomas, CBN News, Ternopil, Ukraine.
Still ahead, we'll discuss whether significant change could happen with Twitter since Elon Musk took a big stake in the company. That story's coming up next. Stay with us. Is a greater tolerance of conservative opinion coming now that Elon Musk is a board member and the largest individual shareholder at Twitter? Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, a member of Young Voices Big Tech Opinion explains what Musk's move means for free speech and the social media giant's future.
I think that this development with Elon Musk certainly presents a unique opportunity to see just how Elon Musk has an impact on changing Twitter's practices. The whole reason why he bought such a sizable share is that he wants to be an activist investor. He wants to see Twitter adhere to more free speech principles when it comes to how they're adhering to their policies. As to whether or not that will actually happen or not remains to be seen.
Of course, many liberal media outlets are expressing concern about that move, criticizing Musk for his past, I guess they call it irresponsible behavior on social media. And MSNBC mentions a 2018 lawsuit against Musk from the Securities and Exchange Commission. Also his anti-vax tweets, they call those irresponsible. And Musk's social media comments are scary. So I'm assuming you have other views. Is this good for Twitter or is it irresponsible and scary, James?
I think that it's an opportunity for Twitter to maybe strike a better balance between where they are right now versus where perhaps Elon Musk would like them to be. I don't think it's necessarily unfair to say that there is probably more moderation being done than perhaps most people would like to go and see. I think Elon Musk has expressed his frustration at that numerous times, and that this is an opportunity for that to maybe change.
Yeah, and he met with the Babylon Bee before his Twitter stock purchase, and that meeting was significant because Twitter had suspended the Bee for its article calling Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary Rachel Levine Man of the Year. Levine's a transsexual. So what signal did Musk's meeting with the Bee send?
He thought that the action that had been taken against the Bee's account was something that was probably a step too far. Twitter does set the policies for how they want people to engage in their community, and their account was suspended because it was viewed as harassment for misgendering Rachel Levine. So I think that, while I didn't necessarily agree with the conditions of reinstating the Babylon Bee's Twitter account, they did have the rights to do what they were doing. And, again, I think that there's something to be said about where these companies are making these choices on the margin and how we can try to strive for something that just, I think, better encompasses a more healthy discourse and allowing for parody, allowing for comedy, allowing for other things. Though I think it is important to balance that against not wanting to do something that might be overly insensitive or hurtful to other folks. They have a community that they've built at Twitter, and they're just being cognizant of that. And I think that, sometimes it gets lost in all of this.
And Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal said this about the social media giant, quote, "Our role is not to be bound by the First Amendment, but our role is to serve a healthy public conversation." Now, he suggests Twitter's less focused on free speech, more on changing times. Your thoughts?
I think that that's not an uncommon refrain from people who operate in this space. It was actually the head of Xbox's development team over there at Microsoft that said something similar, where they believe that gaming console is not, meant to go and respect the First Amendment. The First Amendment, at the end of the day, is a constraint on the government's ability to limit your speech. rights. And these private property, platforms like Twitter or Xbox or insert any social media company here, at the end of the day, they are private property. And that means that they do have the right to go and restrict access and take any of the actions that they want to do. And it's not like it's just these big tech companies. I'll highlight just one example. In the president, Trump, he went and launched Truth Social. And if you read through his terms and services for his platform, it's actually very restrictive.
Okay, so you don't see a major change here just because Elon Musk is on the board now of Twitter.
When we're talking about a business, Twitter actually has some legitimate problems right now. It has a hard time monetizing its service. It has not had healthy profit margins. So I think, for some investors in Twitter, when they see Elon Musk joining the board, I think that, some of them are okay with him wanting to go and work on that free speech issue. But I think that they also want him to be a good steward for the company in trying to tackle the issues that they're facing. How can we make Twitter more profitable and actually, by extension, improve it as a product and service? So I imagine that those changes will be a little bit more slow to take effect if he is successful in his endeavors.
And for a look at other important trends and developments in the world around us, be sure to catch the Global Lane. You can find it on the CBN News Channel at 8:30 Eastern. You can, of course, also download the CBN News app and watch it on demand. Stay with us. Your Thursday Thankful is coming up next. We'll be right back. And welcome back to CBN News Watch. Time for your Thursday Thankful. I'd like to leave you with this prayer of gratitude and pray that you will fill your day with thanksgiving. Father, thank you for the very air that I breathe. It is a sign that I am still alive. I still have a pulse, and therefore I still have a purpose. With that, make this a day filled with gratitude. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. I want to remind you that you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can email us at that address right there on your screen, newswatch@cbn.com. And, of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. We thank you again for being with us and look forward to seeing you right back here, same time tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.